Stormgate has been in development for some time and been available for people to test. It has on a regular basis been updated, optimized performance-wise, updated its artwork, added its third faction along with co-op sub-factions and general gameplay balancing for multiplayer. Along the way, the Frost Giant Studios team has released many blogs and has tried to detail what their long-term plans are and what they are aspiring to try and create. And I wanted to try and bring you an attempted abbreviated video of the blogs and the plans they have introduced, for those who are curious about what the game is being worked toward and might look like in the future. I will skip over some of the things that has already been released, such as customizable hotkeys for instance. A quick look at the roadmap. This is from 4 months ago, but it is likely still relevant. From the blog, looking ahead, Stormgate's path forward. Refocusing and reshaping. We are moving forward as a leaner, more focused team. Our top development priorities are now crystal clear. The campaign and versus 1 versus 1 play and our moments-to-moment RTS gameplay, followed immediately by our Team Mayhem mode. We need to get the foundational modes polished as a precursor to adding more innovation. Other features like the map editor and expanded co-op content are still a part of our long-term plans, but they won't take priority until we've gotten further along with the other key modes. We've seen concerns expressed about the future of Stormgate. As an independent studio, we have limited resources. We are able to share some good news. Bitcraft, one of the investors who helped launch Frost Giant Studios, is leading an additional funding round to support their journey. Their continued investment means the world to us and will help enable us to deliver a solid 1.0 release, which we are tentatively aiming for in the second half of the next year. We want to be very clear here, any potential launch date is not set in stone, as a lot can change over the course of development. Hopefully an informative start of what is to come. Starting with the visuals and art direction. We are excited to share that we have also been making exciting strides on the visual front. Our new art director has jumped in with the fresh ideas to elevate the look and feels of our core factions. Around 8 months ago, Frost Giant Studios got a new art director, Alan Dilling, to bring on a more coherent vision of themes such as faction identities. To my understanding, the focus has been on getting a functional game going up first, with placeholder assets and pitched units being used. To the extreme that they had an behind closed doors soft public testing period to get feedback with the Celestial Armada a few months ago. I do not have the exact quote on that one, if it was a finished NDA from one of the players after the playtesting or a blog that I could not find. But it was in such an early phase with the models that the developers feared that it could cause lasting damage to show it publicly. Now with Alan Dilling and with the feedback from the initial campaign, the team has started to put focus on trying to set in stone the themes of the game. This will hopefully speed things up with a more coherent and finished look to the game, letting the artist focus on something closer to a finished product. From the blog 9 months ago, Stormgate development update, the road ahead for campaign. As we start to replace gameplay models in story sequences with cinematic models, we'll be adding facial animation and lip syncing, as well as bringing limb proportions into a more realistic range. Yes, this includes those beefy forearms. We're also going to revisit the shaky cam to help make it feel better. These improvements has always been planned, but we are accelerating the timetable for them in our schedule because of your feedback. However, as a smaller studio, we started out using our gameplay models just to get the story hashed out, including in our cutscenes. What you are currently seeing up close are gameplay character models that feature exaggerated proportions optimized for long-distance legibility. Similar to how stage actors that use heavier than normal makeup so that their faces can be seen by distant audience members in the back row. This is not a long-term plan, and the process of improving our models for cinematics and cutscenes is already well underway. I've tried to find what I could of planned long-term pitched art themes and factions though some of these are months old and could be scrapped concepts. From 13 months ago in the blog, Samwise Didier unveils Stormgate Creeps 2.0. And senior artist within the art industry that some people might recognize, Samwise Didier has been pitching ideas and contributing to the early creative process of the game. Players will encounter various bounds of dangerous foes as they fight for control of territory, including the savage mechanically enhanced scavengers. In the future, we will share a look at our other creep camp families, the cultists and the cannibals. If the mechanically enhanced scavengers are in distinct subfactions from the marauders, I do not know, but it sounds like the cultists and the cannibals could be an unfinished concept that might be unveiled in the future. No concept art has been released so far of them, however, as far as I can find. The roadmap has mentioned tier 3 units, and a recurring Vanguard concept has been a melee mech unit. Along with the blog that mentioned aesthetic redesign of Brute, Fiend and Hedgehog, was also mentioned a Lancer. In the recent update, the Infernals has had a great deal of overhauls and special campaign monsters. If the Vanguard gets closer to final update, then maybe this mech unit will be a tier 3 unit added to the Vanguard. A potential new Infernal caster has been teased, potentially a flying caster. If this will be a unique hero character or a general unit, however, the future will tell. Mini War Chest. We are planning to create War Chest events where players will be able to earn fun cosmetic rewards by earning XP. An initial mini version of the Stormgate War Chest will be released this year, with our first full War Chest coming in 2025. War Chest, if this is anything similar to what was in StarCraft 2, then this will be a paid sub-faction purely cosmetic aesthetic themes of existing units, that you can apply to your units in Versus and maybe other modes. They have not revealed if this is the case, but from the name I'm guessing that this is essentially just a skin pack. In the past, the apocalyptic visuals for Vanguard has been teased, a more worn down set of look for Vanguard units. The following is not anything revealed in the blogs, but purely guesswork on my part. I'm guessing on the previously mentioned Apocalypse team for Vanguard, and maybe a Marauder themed patchwork armor units. Infernals has two alternative teams I can think of, Malak the right hand and War's Reapers. Malak has so far been described as a red burning destruction team. And while Wars has not seen in the campaign yet, his co-op team has been a more subtle corrupted Void team. And lastly, Celestial Armada, Castiela and his darker path and Justified Means team, sporting dark metal team units. Anything in these blogs do not describe the final product, everything will be subject to change. To start things off, they have stated that it will likely be launched in an early concept phase, likely with bugs and more. The 3 vs 3 Mayhem mode will not be like 1 vs 1 with more players, by the sounds of what they've described. The goal, as described so far, will be to try and have some sort of co-op versus mode, without traditional base building, trying to have a middle of the map skirmish. Objective-based gameplay to tilt the game in your favor, and with the ultimate goal of defeating the enemy's big building while protecting your own. We are not just calling it 3 vs 3, because it's a significant departure from what you might expect from 3 vs 3, 2 teams of 3 players fighting under vanilla standard RTS rules. We hope this name captures how different this mode will be compared to traditional 2 vs 2 and 3 vs 3, which we can also revisit and support in the future. The prototype emphasizing pulling combat out of player spaces and focusing on shared objectives. This design aimed to reduce the pressure on individual players, making the game more enjoyable and less stressful, especially for newcomers. Combat centered around creep camps, capture points and expansion, with the destruction of the enemy's shared structure acting as a central victory condition. These elements encourage teamwork and prevent early elimination, ensuring that players could enjoy the game from start to finish. Addressing complexity and UI challenges. One of our key takeaways from the prototype is the need to simplify the experience without losing depth. The prototype was praised by experienced RTS players who tested it behind closed doors. They shared that it felt low stress, interesting and social. But the mode conversely felt overwhelming for those less familiar with RTS games. One even said it felt like an RTS with even more systems on top. We'll share some ways we are aiming to address this in our next update. A goal for Team Mayhem. Team-focused gameplay, starting together, ending together. Short or medium game length, easy to fit multiple matches into our play session. Loads of positive team play opportunities, also avoid conflict between teammates. Support hero and sub-faction variety, to keep the meta and team comps highly varied. The goal seems to be somewhat compact matches, trying to avoid turtle stalemates. Team-focused gameplay and positive gameplay opportunities. From what I've read, I think this would be an overall trying to create an environment where you will not be competing for benefits, such as resource points while benefiting from each other's actions, and something similar to co-op with sub-factions and hero units, not just having 3 core factions as playable options. What you can expect with the bases and economy. Each team has a heavily defended base in a very safe starting area. Your starting area will be heavily defended, meaning that you might be able to economically rush or rush for objectives and base expansion, but having a difficult time with starting off with attacking the enemy directly. Your starting structure, HQ, automatically generates Luminite over time and is invulnerable, so there is no knockout via player destruction elimination. Fixed income. There are further talking points that goes into detail for clarity. Each team also shares an allied core structure that is the main win-loss condition. Plain and simply described. No workers or starting scouting units, eliminating micromanagement of workers. All buildings, training and upgrade is handled through the quick macro panel. This is very much a work in progress, where they are working out the details with how you will be limited with space building, as further talking points will detail. You can build anywhere within your team's vision. This means that things will likely work in a similar way to Celestial Armada's base building from my understanding. Structures can be set to auto-train units. Not much to comment on this one. It's convenience that might make sense with the comments on unit rosters. Expansion is limited to one structure, similar to a collection array, which is placed directly on a Luminite mine that auto-harvests. Again, more of a fixed income concept. There will be less of a static snowballing with economy feel to this mode, but there will likely still be economical benefits from clearing creep camps to get ahead of the enemy. Resource management. One area of confusion for players was resource management, specifically Ethereum. Many playtesters didn't understand how to gather it, while others even suggested that everyone should receive resources automatically. Our focus is on making resource gathering more intuitive by adding clear indicators for what activities generate Ethereum, and making sure that there are fun choices and trade-offs between economical growth and the other aspects of gameplay. Another point of economical conflict was the bonus resources provided by clearing creep camps. Players didn't like having to compete with their allies to gain these bonus resources, so we are responding by adjusting creep camp resource bonuses to automatically be distributed to the whole team, rather than exclusively to the player that defeated them. By the sounds of it, you will be having a steady stream of Luminite for producing basic units, but Ethereum will be more scarce for upgrading and higher tier units, and more focus on avoiding competing for benefits by sharing the benefits of accomplishments. Boom time, building and expansion. Our initial freeform approach to building placement and expansion sparked a lot of discussion. Some players felt that constructing buildings, especially within their own base, lacked any strategical depth. Others found that building expansion offered little in the way of high-stake decision-making. We found some players that would even completely surround their core with turrets, making it a slow and unfun slog for the other team to break through and finish the game. In response, we are now attempting to use level layout to address this issue by creating clearly visible areas of control, similar to the Celestials' cascade field, that explain where players can place static defense and other structures. Where on the map you can place what structures will still be an ongoing topic that I will be working on, but as later talking points will detail, you will be incentivized to build your infrastructure out on the map. Unlike 1 vs 1, this map is designed around a new central mechanic for this mode, the batteries and the cores. We wanted the batteries to be placed in neutral territory, away from the player's main base, to encourage the construction of defensible position at the dominant sites across the map. There will be some attempt to make you go out on the map and establish your base around some objective that the enemy will be trying to contest by the sounds of it. There is not much more details I can share from the blogs so far, but hopefully this will give you some perspective with how base management and economy will work in 3 vs 3 Mayhem. Now for army and general gameplay to expect. To make each hero and their hero faction feel distinct, they'll each be refined down to 5 units, 5 structures and 5 unit specific upgrades with a max supply of 100. For initial testing, additional upgrades act as tier gates. This could be interpreted in many ways. 5 units and 5 unit specific upgrades. Does this mean that you have 5 types of units or 5 faction exclusive units with more baseline units available? 5 structures. I have no idea if this excludes static defense, harvesting structures or supply structure, or if you start with 100 supply. No top bar abilities for this mode. Straightforward. In co-op you can have 3 players using global abilities because crushing the AI is fun. In 1 vs 1, the top bar abilities are acceptable because it's only 1 opponent. But in 3 vs 3 it might be too chaotic with the ability to maybe completely lock down the enemy to the point where it's literally nothing you can do to stop them. Looking ahead, our approach to the first external playtest will likely be framed very similarly to how we conducted our internal playtesting. To start things off, we will initially include a core group of 3 heroes, Blockade, Malok and Castiel. Each of these characters represent a very different and distinct playstyle, enabling us to get a feel for players' preferences and any community feedback around team composition and gameplay roles. After that initial public test concludes and we have solidified the core mode's rule sets and player experiences, we'll move to expand the roster to include all the game's heroes, as well as maybe even some Mayhem exclusive ones. Many sub-factions with different playstyles, starting with Blockade, Malok and Castiel. Again, from previous wording of 5 different units and structure, subject to change, I have no idea how this will look like with mech play, airplay and so on. We are finding the fun, but there's plenty of room to improve. Overall, our devs are convinced that we are moving in the right direction. The fast-paced, explosive nature of teamfights have received a strong positive response, but we also learned that there are room for improvements. For example, some dev playtesters found that taking up didn't feel necessary, due to some of the starting units being sufficient to carry them throughout the entire match. Other players were able to find success by spamming static defense. This feedback mirrors some of the sentiment we've seen from players on the live games, who feel that tier 1 units are all they need and don't feel a strong incentive to take up. This is a good reminder for us to ensure that the players progress throughout the game, higher tier units and strategies feel more rewarding and impactful regardless of the game mode. This is all internal feedback being shared, so take what you will from it. But from the sound of it, the game to the core sounds casual and friendly enough that staying with tier 1 units feel viable enough to win matches. Efforts are being put into making higher tier units more interesting to be produced. But so far, this talking point making it sound like, despite how much detail are being put into the game mode, it sounds simple enough for casual players to enjoy it. Hero balancing and pacing. Many of you are curious as to how heroes will work in Team Mayhem. For starters, they will be very different from how they operate in 3-player co-op missions. We are not reusing the meta progress from 3-player co-op missions in Team Mayhem. Instead, we have decided to keep each hero capped at the same meta progress level. Although we are currently testing the mode with level 1 heroes, we may end up setting the competitive baseline to level 5, 10 or maybe something entirely different. This is still to be determined as we are focusing on establishing the core rules of the mode first before we really dig into the competitive balancing of the heroes themselves. Things are still being discussed internally about how commanders will work by the looks of it, if there will be leveling or not by the sounds of it, similar to co-op commanders getting stronger, or if it will be any progress at all. Why are all heroes the same level for all players? Above all else, we want this mode to be truly fair for everyone and not to be a pay-to-win experience. While we may move to a different system in the future if it feels like the right fit for the game, we believe it's important that all players have access to the heroes they need to create balanced and fair matches without requiring any sort of purchase. For our initial external playtests, only Blockade, Malok and Castiel will be available for use in Team Mayhem, regardless of whether they have been purchased or not. To be abundantly clear, we might make changes to this approach after the initial playtests, as we are intentionally holding back on defining the mode's final monetization mode until after the gameplay has been fully hardened with input from the community. This one I'm struggling a little bit with understanding, focusing on the we believe it's important that all players have access to all the heroes they need to create balanced and fair matches. And we want this mode to be truly fair for everyone and not pay-to-win experiences. These 2 points make it almost sound like you will be having some pre-matches set up similar to other genres, where you will take turn picking a team composition with healer, tanks and DPS, instead of just picking a faction, queue up and get into the match. The wording of the first paragraph here is a little bit difficult to understand, but the second paragraph of the quotes state that they have not determined a way to monetize the game mode yet. What does each hero come with? Each hero represents a sub-faction of sorts and will be able to recruit from a curated selection of units, helping to set each hero apart with a firm gameplay identity that still provides a good mix of gameplay options to choose from. The goal is to enable heroes to be very distinct from each other, while still upholding the game mode's objectives. For example, here is a starter list of units for each initial hero. Blockade, Guardsman, Crusader, Combat Medic, Atlas, Evac and Helicarrier. Malok, Fiend, Flame Imp, Fire Giant, Chimera and Mortardon. Castiel, Eradicator, Kree, Saber, Scythe and Archangel. The wording here, starter list of units, is a little difficult to understand, added to the point that Blockade and Malok has 6 units, while Castiel has 5. Points like this could be entirely moot, with it possibly just being me misunderstanding something slightly ambiguous that could mean something entirely else than what I understand. But this is just again iterating that different characters will have different units and buildings. The relative balance of power levels between heroes and regular units was a heavy topic during the playtest. Heroes felt overwhelmingly strong, with some players noting that hero abilities were used so frequently that it felt like a mostly microgame. At the same time, they wanted more meaningful decision-making moments outside of micromanagement. As we move forward, we are going to address this by reducing the rate of hero energy regeneration and increase the need for players to manage their energy. We don't want to go too far and starve heroes of being able to use their abilities, but we do want ability usage to be meaningful choices with trade-off to consider. We're also experimenting with heroes being able to level up mid-game using a modified version of our veterancy system. This will enable hero power to grow from the beginning of the match to the end and reward players for accruing experience through successful play. As heroes level up, they will again increase to their health, damage and abilities, enabling them to become more capable as the game goes on. To be clear, this level process is different from the out-of-game hero progression of 3-player co-op, and it provides an immediate, temporary reward for you in-game action that is reset at the end of the match. By the sounds of it, they want hero units to have presence, so to speak, on the battlefield, but do not want them to be the bulk of the army. They could be viewed as sort of top-power abilities, providing healing, soaking damage and what else. But in the start of the match at least they will be far less powerful than what they are in co-op. Everything that has been mentioned and speculated is subject to change, but this should hopefully bring some insight into what to expect from general gameplay and army elements. Lastly, objectives, features and winning conditions. Everything is subject to change. Currently they only have one map with the destroy enemy big building as the objective, which could be replaced with King of the Hill style map in the future to hold points and anything else. But from everything that has been described so far, while harassing enemy bases will tilt the battle in your favor, it won't win you the game by killing individual players. Creep camps, map objectives, grants victory points and Tyrium. Victory points increase the amount of damage your team's units deal to the enemy core. Map objectives will be contributing to winning the game, so there will be more gameplay than sending your army against the enemy army. A major boss creep is located on a map and, once defeated, will march toward the enemy core to attack it, ignoring enemy units along the way. This is one example of the game mode being more than PvP, being active with attacking creep camps where they contribute to your team. How do I win? Victory points and map control. One of the most significant pieces of feedback was a general level of confusion about the concept of victory points. Several testers forgot what victory points represented or didn't notice their impact during the game. Players also wanted a clear understanding of how map control, particularly capture point key locations, could impact their ability to close out the game. A lot of fundamental questions were asked, such as, do we need a victory point system at all then? And why not just play until you blow up the enemy core? We expect this aspect of the mode to be iterated for quite some time, but are initially focusing on enabling its current functionality to be communicated to players as clearly as possible. By the sound of it, it was not spelled out clearly what benefits the victory points contributed. Further talking points will likely make it clear why it could be a little confusing. But it could be easy to miss less obvious benefits, such as hypothetically a control point giving massive armor reduction to the enemy core static defense, for instance. All your bases core defense. Going into our initial testing, we were looking at our primary win condition, destroying the enemy team's core. Some testers also raised concerns about the lack of strong core defense, describing the core itself as being squishy and too reliant on player protection. This concern was especially true for teams of players new to RTS games, or for those with mixed experience levels, where some players would not know how to properly augment their core by constructing additional static defense. In response, we are exploring adding some amount of limited automated defense to cores, which will also hopefully make endgame moments feel more thrilling and strategic. Many of us also felt that the map could benefit from more action occurring out in the middle, as creep camps were taken out too quickly for the other team to be able to contest properly. Moving forward, we'll adjust creep camps and capture mechanic to give players a bit more time to react and fight over key points. By the sounds of it, the final core will not be indestructible until something has been accomplished, but they are working towards heavily incentivizing you to initially at least fight over objectives, creep camps and map domination. Introducing core battery power. Additionally, to help further address both the previous areas of feedback, We're reworking the victory point system to be more visible, flavorful and engaging. We're temporarily calling it core battery power, but will replace it with something more snazzy if we wind up committing to the mechanic. In its initial iteration, we had a visible progress bar broken into 4 segments. Each segment, when filled, would result in your core firing at the enemy, similar to Major Geld's Iron Bolt from the Wreak Havoc Coop mission. The first 2 segments, for example, would destroy some of the enemy team's invulnerable automated defense, which would make their base more approachable by your army. If your team was far ahead, this could offer an opportune time to close things out and secure victory. We really liked the idea that when games weren't close, they could be ended quickly. But if the struggle was still too close to call, the team could fire additional barrages to make the enemy core more vulnerable until an army was able to clinch victory. With this new approach, teams in our most recent tests were able to pick up batteries to charge their core. These batteries could be obtained by destroying special battery towers that spawned every few minutes in the corners of the map. These battery towers were intended to be the most effective way to directly damage the enemy team's defenses, and would help foster exciting team fights whenever they spawned. After some playtests, however, we made a change because the overall system felt too complex. After some discussion, we decided to simplify things by redesigning the core batteries bar UI so that it could fire the iron bolt each time the entire bar filled up, before immediately resetting to empty so that the team could fill it up again. In particular, we liked that this change could help encourage comeback, a topic that we'll touch on a little more soon. By the sounds of it, the initial hope was to create some system to make your opponent's core more vulnerable with the objectives completed, and having some option to finish the game with brute force if you are sufficiently ahead of the enemy. A part of the reason why it was difficult to understand, I'd imagine, is because most people would simply queue up into the game without reading too much into what set 3 vs 3 Mayhem game mode apart from others. Comeback mechanics. One thing we'd like to achieve is keeping our game from feeling too snowbally. We want players to feel like they should fight hard even after falling behind, because there should be a path for players to come back from a rocky start through skilled play even when their opponents are at a supply or economical advantage. There are many possible ways to potentially accomplish this, and we're working to identify which solution will feel the most fun and interesting to players. For example, one comeback mechanic might be to temporarily provide the losing team with increased bonus resources for killing creeps. Another might be to charge the losing team's core battery faster, or to enable their slain heroes to respawn faster. We're planning to experiment with multiple different solutions, and will go more in depth on this topic in a future update. Currently, there has not been any concrete elements that comeback mechanics will apply to, such as losing a large portion of your army, having your base be trashed or get behind on objectives. But as stated, the plan is to add some extra means of recovering from losing, one way or another. Map design priorities. Creating a map for a 3 vs 3 mode involved a completely different approach than a traditional 1 vs 1 map. George, one of the designers who helped build Scorched Earth, explained. My main goal was to create an engaging playspace that could accommodate 6 armies, offering a variety of tactics and complement the battery and core mechanics. This map offers a lot of opportunities for teams to outmaneuver, pincer, funnel, flank and surprise the opposing team, while offering multiple defensive positions. He also emphasized how Team Mayhem encourages players to build forward positions and defend neutral territory. Unlike 1 vs 1, this map is designed around a new central mechanic for this mode, the batteries and the core. We wanted the batteries to be placed in neutral territory, away from the player's main bases, to encourage the construction of defensible positions at the illuminate sites across the map. By the sounds of it, it will be partly up to you to some extent to make it difficult for the enemy to achieve map objectives. But so far it sounds as if it wouldn't be the case that you suddenly lose when objectives are completed, with the initial feedback being that a great deal of the players barely realized what the objectives actually did, though everything described here is subject to change. Varied gameplay and tactical choices. One of the key elements of Scorched Earth is providing players with meaningful choices throughout the game, as Greg, another designer on Team Mayhem, pointed out. We wanted to make a map where there isn't a clear best way to play it. We want players to have several options for what they can do at any given point in the game. Some areas of Scorched Earth focus heavily on expansion, while others offer key objectives such as additional battery towers, creep camps, and even a boss creep. This way you could claim advantage that fits your personal playstyle or your team's goals. Greg further explained how different parts of the map is designed to support varying playstyles. For example, the bottom left corner is very expansion heavy, while the top right corner has an extra battery tower spawn, more creep camps, as well as the boss creep. The map design's philosophy so far sounds like it will be tailored to try and make all playstyles viable in one way or another. Defensive players having the option to try and create defensive bunker lines to make it difficult for the enemies to advance. Objective and creep camp clearing players will be able to contribute with dealing with the PvE aspect of the game, and aggressive mobile players handling harassment and attacking enemy players. Hopefully the plans around the 3 vs 3 Mayhem game mode will be a little clearer and maybe pique some of your interests. If you want to read the full blogs, then the 3 blogs will be in the video's description. I've tried to comb through the blogs, and paradoxically, there is not much to cover because they have already implemented a lot of the plans. RPG elements to heroes, customization to units, mission hub, reworking campaign, and updated models to be slightly less placeholder. But I've tried to find some older elements that could still excite people for the future before the game is deemed ready to be declared patch 1.0 released. Please note that this is a preview of our launched campaign for testing purposes and not a finished work. If you have been waiting for the completed release of our campaign before experiencing our story, we recommend that you wait patiently and check out when it is done. What you see today is not the finish line for the first 6 missions, it's the starting line. We've established a really solid foundation from which to build, and will now begin the iteration process to flesh out and finish the campaign. Hopefully a good healthy start. What is currently being presented is in development and subject to change, and it's okay to wait for a finished product. Story. A number of you have also shared concerns about Stormgate's storyline feeling too similar. Understandably, you want this new RTS to explore fresh narratives and establish a truly new world. I want to acknowledge that we hear your concern and that we fundamentally agree. It's fair feedback that our starting point invites a lot of direct comparisons. As with our factions, we started with some conscious familiar reference points. But please consider that the first few steps of many heroes' journeys often look similar. We've only just begun our characters' story arcs, and we have way more in store for each of them as their journeys continues to unfold. If you've tried the new campaign, you will see that it and the story has been almost fundamentally changed, from character personalities to core presentations of how the conflict starts. A big note on this one, this was from a blog 10 months ago, the Stormgate roadmap. 9 new campaign missions. This includes Vanguard Chapter 3 and the first 2 chapters of our Infernal campaign. The hope was at the very least for 2025 to give 9 Vanguard missions total and 6 Infernal missions. With the basically complete rework of the campaign that arrives in 0.4.0, I have no idea if this is still their ambition. But the hope is there with how much the blog so far has pointed out that efforts has been shifted into the campaign, that this will still be on the timetable. Co-op for campaign. This was from Loco's interview with the game director Tim Campbell. The hope was for an eventual cooperative option for the campaign, so that you could play together in it. But for the moment that plan had been put on ice for now in order to deliver a presentable game first. Also, as I was skimming through the blogs again, I found this. Co-op campaign. We will be adding co-op functionality to all of our campaign missions. If you've paid for campaign content, you will be able to invite friends to play with you for free. They won't have to pay to play. If you have friends with the campaign, you could play with them as partners together without owning it yourself. More playable heroes like maybe a temporary Marauder heroes or full-on mini-faction gameplay has been teased in the future. For the campaign and maybe co-op and 3 vs 3 Mayhem. Integrated tournaments. We want players to be able to spin up tournaments from within the client. If this will be a periodical tournament or something you can set up yourself, I have no idea. But some form of built-in tournament system is in the works. Tier 3 units. More Tier 3 units. Nothing concrete, but there is hope for new big units. Quick reiteration from the start of the video, that 1 vs 1 is one of the highest priorities to get right currently. Refocusing and reshaping. We are moving forward as a leaner, more focused team. Our top development priorities are now crystal clear. The campaign and 1 vs 1 play, our moment-to-moment RTS gameplay, followed immediately by our Team Mayhem mode. It has not been pointed out in blogs, but in YouTube interviews it has been heavily hinted about having a 4th full race in Stormgate. So that is planned way ahead past the release of the game. Partnership with Untapped.gg. The reason why I'm adding this in versus coverage is because they will try to bring an potentially huge addition to the game, replay analysis. In an RTS you deal with resource management, build orders and usually supply, and it can be difficult to narrow down exactly where you can improve. With the replay analysis that for instance points out how much Luminat you have when building your 1st or 2nd army building, you can determine how many units you should build ideally, before making a new structure to narrow down build orders to a razor's edge. Exactly what Untapped will provide is not something I can say with confidence, because it's being developed, but I am hopeful that it will make things better for casuals that want some general improvement to their play with understanding where things go slightly wrong and hardcore enthusiasts that want to narrow down buildings to the finest details. With the release of our 0.4.0 update, please note that co-op mode has not received the vast majority of recent changes coming to Stormgate. To preserve gameplay stability and prevent compatibility issues, the co-op portion of Stormgate has intentionally frozen prior to the extensive faction change introduction. As a result, players will notice that co-op still uses legacy unit models, including the Brute, Fiend, Gaunt, Bob, Hedgehog, Hornet and others. Our goal is to apply the latest version of these models and other updates to co-op in the future, after we have completed some necessary engineering work on our back end to better support the application of our game data from mode to mode. We remain committed to support a fun 3-player co-op experience and appreciate your patience and understanding. It sucks that for the foreseeable future we will get minimal in terms of co-op content, but it has been stated that it is not dead, just put on a secondary priority. The editor. This is something that I have had great hopes for. When will it be made available to try? No idea, but here is some of the hopes for what it will look like. From the Stormgate roadmap released 10 months ago. Please note that some content and game features will be coming after Stormgate's early access release. This includes mid-season campaign saves, the in-game editor and our competitive 3 vs 3 mode. The estimate is beyond the game's post-early access release, though other blogs says that there is hope for an early test version before leaving early access. Map Editor Showcase. We're planning to reveal more of our development on the editor later this year. Similar to how we have already unveiled some of our editor tools and looking at one of the custom game modes developed in-house using this toolset. If there's anything specific you want to see about the editor, make sure to let us know about it in the modding channel on Discord. Maybe some more showcasing within this year. Maybe if you're curious about anything, then you could give it a shot and ask any question in the Discord of theirs about anything you want to see. Coming in 2025, Map Editor Debut. While we're aiming to get something out to players as soon as we can, we are confident in being able to put the initial version of the editor into players' hands next year. It will be a rough initial idea, hopefully within 2025, emphasizing hopefully. Frostgiant Studios presented a first look on YouTube for you to see some of what they had done over a year ago. This could very well be far more advanced and user-friendly today, however, and is not reflective of what they will release for initial testing. While there are no major plans for adding naval elements in 1 vs 1 or likely co-op, it was briefly mentioned that there was goals for making it possible for people to use the editor to create naval combat or otherwise. This was published in the blog First Look at the Stormgate Editor at GDC 2024, which was 13 months ago, but there is one really big point for the editor that was teased. In addition, our technology supports replays and spectating, as well as the ability for players to join a match already in progress. Joining a match already in progress, huge for map making ideas. If this is still a thing, I do not know, but for casual custom games, being able to join an existing custom is huge. The potentially hours-long maps you could join in the middle of being played that expands the potential creativity of what can be made a lot. If this is still a thing, however, I have no idea, but still, this could be huge if it still is in the plans. I struggled with finding this one, but here it is. There was at least at some point talks about trying to support 32 players in a match, which can only end well in custom games. That's an attempt at covering the blocks that has not delivered its content, with possible additions to how the game will look like in the future. Remember that everything that is said here is subject to change, maybe even through your feedback to the developers. Stay intact and have a nice day.